Whisper Ramble video, so no gum chewing, no other sounds really today. I might take a sip of ye old water over here if I require my thirst to be quenched. But otherwise it's going to be just a normal whispering video today. So I thought I would do, just a little whisper ramble. For those of you that don't like anything else other than just whispers. I know that there are people out there that, you don't like the gum chewing, you don't like the food eating sounds, you want to just listen to a whisper video, and I totally get it. I'm like that sometimes. I sometimes prefer to listen just to the whispers. Don't like the gum chewing sometimes. And maybe you're just not in the mood for it today, and well, you've got an alternative here. So, part of today's little ramble video, I've got myself another topic to chat about. I thought that'd be an interesting topic today, which is why I think that horror video games hit differently to horror movies. I think they hit a little bit differently, personally for me anyway. Now, I will go out on a limb bit and say it's a bit weird because I wouldn't say that I don't dislike horror movies, but I've noticed over the years they have an effect on me that I don't necessarily enjoy. What I mean by that is, it's not necessarily a case of me being spooked out or scared by movies like ghost movies. It's less about like things of the paranormal and more of like I don't like to see people suffering, and I've noticed, I don't know if it's something that's kind of recent or if it's more of like a recent manifestation, or something that I've always felt that I've really only been able to articulate recently, and I think it's probably more so the latter. I enjoy horror movies, like the idea of horror movies. They're cool, I like the way they're shot. Some of them are awful, but generally I think it's a fun genre. But I don't like seeing like that. There's a point in which I just feel like it messes with me a little bit, and I think within the scope of that, part of that is because they're humans, right? I can see that actually actors, they're real human beings that are being represented here. When it's through animation, maybe less so much. Like Love, Death and Robots, for example. There's a lot of horror stuff in there, and I won't say it has the same effect, but I just want to preface with that before I go any further. But I do like horror movies, but I do find it hard to enjoy them sometimes, because mentally afterwards I'm like, I just feel, I don't know, I feel a lot of empathy for the people that suffer in those films, and so it leaves me with not a feeling of like, oh, I was thrilled, more of like just this empty feeling, and I didn't really enjoy that. Video games, on the other hand, I feel like they don't quite have the same effect on me, because there's probably still an element, but because they're not actually visible human beings, because they're obviously video game characters. No matter how good the graphics are, they will always look like actual video game characters. They will never look human, at least with the graphics we have currently. You can always still tell, right? There's still a visible element there. So, I guess the point I'm trying to make to begin with here is that there is a little bit of a difference in my view. So, with that in mind, I thought I would chat a games. I do love my horror video game genre. And there's a way that this medium is able to reflect horror that a film cannot, and the closest way I would say in a film that you can get to that is like found footage films that are all recorded first person on a camera. And I don't just mean as a reflection of first person horror games like Outlast, for example, which is basically that, right? It's found footage, is what it's meant to be, in a sense. Granted, it's not the whole thing, it's not just with the camera, but I digress. But also from the idea of putting you in the perspective, as opposed to being an outside observer. In a lot of horror films, you are the outside observer, either because you are the camera's watching, or you are a non-existent entity that watches from beyond, right? I.e., you are the audience watching a camera that isn't really there diegetically in the movie. Instead, you are observing outside of the universe. And there's a distance with that, right? You don't have any engagement beyond the fact that the action might be thrilling, the tension for what is going to happen to these people. But it's always about what's going to happen to these people, the characters on the screen. Never to what is going to happen to you. You would never watch, say, let's say, Insidious, and feel a sense of like, oh my god, that guy's gonna kill me, as opposed to, oh, that guy's gonna kill him, or whatever it might be. So, immediately, there is the difference there, right? When you are playing in a video game, you are the active protagonist. Whether you're playing a character or not doesn't matter, right? Even if it is obvious the character is in third person, it doesn't matter. It is you, right? From the perspective that you control this person. Whether there's a distance or not, it is irrelevant, because you're interacting with that universe. You play that character, you make the decisions. When you are attacked, you would say, oh, it attacked me, as opposed to, oh, it attacked my avatar, or it attacked the character in the game. You become the character mentally from that perspective. And so, whether or not it's in first person or third person, like Dead Space, you are mentally within that scene. And so I think the horror can hit a lot harder when you feel like it's happening to you, as opposed to a character on screen. Now, obviously different mediums have different sort of benefits, pros and cons within that, but within a video game, I guess where you could argue with games where horror is at least like relevant, there needs to be a threat. In a movie with a horror element to it, there has to be a threat that is existing. And so in the movie, there's a preordained script. You know what's going to happen. You can't redo things. And for example, in a movie, if a character dies, they're dead. There's no going back. And you know that even if it's pre-written, you don't necessarily know the outcome. Whereas in a video game, that's not necessarily the case. You could be playing Dead Space and die in the very first time the alien shows up, or the necromorph, or whatever they're called. When they show up, they can kill you instantly. And now, here's the thing, I'm not saying that all of the horror disappears, but there is an element that the first time you die in a video game, the novelty begins to wear off, the feeling of dread begins to subside, I think, anyway. The more that you die in a game, to the point in which you just start getting tired of it, the the less that happens, the more successful the horror is. But in a video game, you have to have that threat. If you mess up or something happens, that you die. Otherwise, where is the threat? Where is the sense that you've made a mistake and now things have gone wrong, and that it relies on that as the tension. So there's a difference in the medium. And I know there are people out there who would say like there are walking simulator-esque games, typically like the backroom type games where you just wander around and like there's like scripted moments of entities appearing, but for me that isn't horror. Like I love watching streamers play horror games, but I really just don't mess with that bit, because for me there's like there's no danger, so I don't feel like fear from that. Whereas playing Alien, knowing that at any moment if I make a sound too loud, the alien could appear. I don't know what the scripted moments are where it is not able to spawn, but it can spawn nearly all the time if you make enough sound, say for certain parts of the story where that would break the game. But like, the point being there that existential threat is really required, and it can wear off, so it's a con of that, I suppose. But the feeling that the thing is hunting you, like, well, I'll use Alien for an example, right? The feeling of Alien, and there's a whole argument to be made about third person versus first person, which actually I do have some notes on here, which are, first person, you are in the perspective, you become the character, even more so than the third person. You are looking from your perspective, you don't get that sort of not 360, but like wider viewpoint, or field of view. You are more in the action, whereas third person, you are slightly more distant, but it's more, I would say it's more or less the same. It's just that there are different senses of horror when it comes from those two perspectives, because with third person horror it can be like really tight to move the camera around, you might not be able to see around a corner or any manner of different things, and I think it's a different type of sub-genre of the horror is third and first person. But we'll use Alien Isolation as an example here. So let me just check I put the right, yeah. So, for example, with Alien Isolation, you feel that thing hunting you. It isn't a case like in, say, Alien with Ellen Ripley, that you are watching her being hunted. There's like you feel tension for her, but there's a difference in video games where you feel like the thing is hunting you. And it's a different sense, it's a different feeling, and there's a thrill and a tension there that you don't really get in the same capacity when watching a movie, because you are safely in your seat, you can look away, right? If I was watching a movie, I could look away from the screen, wait for the moment to pass, and then re-engage if there was something I didn't want to see. Now, cutscenes in games are kind of like that, but for example here, let's say I've just been caught by the alien, it's spotted where I am. If I turn well, maybe not quite so much that, because like it would enter into a cutscene, but for example, let's say I hear the alien drop in front of me and I'm hiding behind a bit of terrain, and I don't know if it's going to be able to see me or not. If I turn myself away from the screen and don't look, what's going to happen? Well, nothing is going to happen in the game, because it requires me to actively interact with it in order to save this character, to save myself from dying. So I can't look away, and there is a tension and horror in that as well, right? You cannot look away from the scene, otherwise you will feel the consequences of that. Unless it's a cutscene, but that's different. But you can't look away and then look back when things are sorted out, because you're the one playing the game. If I look away, Amanda Ripley will just sit there and nothing will happen. The alien might run away, the alien might find me, who knows, but all I know is that it will not have sorted itself properly if I look away. And that means like you can't just pause the game. look away and come back when it's all dealt with, the way that you could in a film, or any other sort of like media like that. And I think that's really interesting. I think that's quite fun. And that itself is a very interactive horror that you wouldn't normally get from other sorts of media. So yeah, I think that's quite a lot of fun seeing that. So it's kind of like immersion through control, right? You are immersed because you are controlling the story, even if it's pre-scripted, like there's quests and there's like a storyline. You are still in control of the story without you actively as an agent playing the game. The story doesn't progress. If the moment the cutscene at the beginning of the game ends, I put the controller down, the story will not continue. I am required as an active agent to progress the story, and because of that, you're immediately brought into the world, you're brought into a game. Now, some games bring you in better than others, and that's really kind of a critique of a game's ability to do that. But overall, as a sense, playing a video game engages you more so than watching a film, in as much as being, I guess, like related to the character or empathy. Like the level of empathy, I think, is greater there, because there's like a boundary that blurs between you and the character. When you make a choice in a video game to save or kill someone, and you click one of those options, did the character make that or did you make that? Obviously you made the decision, but in the game world it's the character that made the decision. But you just pressed an option, but for them they made a choice. And there's a boundary there that blurs, I think, where we start to kind of like imagine ourselves as those characters, whether, regardless of the sort of stretch of imagination you have. Some people maybe don't feel that way, but I think generally when you actively are engaged as someone in a game, it kind of changes your perspective of that. I don't know about consequences, like the fear of consequences. In movies they're fixed. In games you can make mistakes, you can make different choices depending on the kind of game that it is. Like in a movie, granted, the characters can make mistakes and it might end up with their death, but that's something where you're like, oh, don't go into the closet, that's so stupid. But in a video game, like, you're the one making those choices, right? You are in a position of that character. When you play the video game, you are like that character in the movie. You run into a room and you're being chased. You've got a split second to make a decision. You look around. There's a closet to hide in. There's like a window, but it might be locked. If it's locked, you're going to get caught. You could go under the bed, but everyone looks under the bed. You could try and hide behind the curtain, but what if they look over and see like a bulge in the curtain? The closet's the best option. And in reality, like, when we're watching a film, we might be like, just jump out the window, but that's not an option that you might think of in a video game. You might just go like, oh, I don't know, hide in here, and you have to then live with those consequences. And I think that's interesting because it takes us from a position of critiquing from an outside perspective and then forces us to try and have to make those choices. Now obviously video games are coded, they can't always give you all of those options. You might run into a room and, as the player, say, this is stupid, the character should be able to try and at least open the window. And some games will be lenient on their death policy, right? You might run into the room and feel safe enough to try the window because, if you die, you're just going to start back at the doorway and you choose a different option. Whereas some other games employ limited saves as a means of building horror, so that I would have to redo 30 minutes of gameplay if I die here. So there's the horror is like kind of really losing a life. The loss of time is kind of the equivalent of like, I don't want to die. And I think it's a good way of like adding that in. Sometimes it doesn't work that well. It can be frustrating, especially in modern games where there's so much going on that it glitches. Like, there are bugs and glitches galore these days in games because they're so complicated. And the systems they run on are complicated. So it feels like everything is released with a million bugs And that can be frustrating if you've got a game where it doesn't save. For example, you spend half an hour from a save only to get to a point where an item you need hasn't spawned and you have to reload a save. That would kill the game for me. That would kill a game. I would literally just look at it and go, nah. And so it doesn't always work, but generally speaking, it's a pretty good way of building the tension. Yes. I've got a little bit about how long video games last. Obviously, films last for 2 to 3 hours generally, if not shorter than that. And so there's a limited pace of the film, there's a limited amount to the amount of horror, whereas in a video game there can be long stretches. It could be, I would say generally horror games like that probably last between 5 to 20 hours, which on paper sounds like a lot, but actually it's not that long. So you could play a game for quite a long time and experience a long stretch of horror. And the pacings are different, right? The sort of tense moments are different. And in different games, it's impossible to really just give a be-all for them, because it's hard to generalise when there's so many subgenres of horror anyway. But video games give you that option to experience horror for a longer period of time, and gives more of options for their creators. There's a whole other avenue for things like VR, right? VR horror games takes what I've just said, especially first person, which generally the VR games are, right, and puts it in a brand new perspective where you are literally in the space. Well, okay, not literally. Psychologically, you are literally in the space. You look around and you are in that area. That is what you see. It's not just a screen in front of you. You are literally looking around in the space, and that takes it to a whole other level of immersion. And you can see the way that people freak out with horror when they do VR, because it is messed up. I remember doing a VR thing. It wasn't really horror, but my first real experience with VR was at an open day for university, and they had stuff going on. One of them was, you may have heard of this specific thing, which is, all it is, headphones and a VR set, and you have a wooden board that's held a few inches off the ground, and you have to walk the plank basically, but the VR set shows you stepping out of a building over a plank, and then the person tells you to jump, and then you have to jump off of the plank, and the sound, the sight, it is incredible. I remember putting it on and my legs went to jelly, because I do not like heights, and my legs went to jelly, and I know that I'm stood inside this room with a crowd of people, but somehow my mind is telling me that is not the case, and so I cannot step off the edge. Eventually what I do is I kind of blur my eyes so that they're kind of technically open, but I force my eyes to go out of focus so I can mentally not visualize what I'm seeing and just jump to get it over with. So things like that make it crazy. But yeah, I think that is a pretty good roundup of my thoughts on horror in video games, and why I think they can be, at least for me, they're more effective in video games for a litany of different reasons. Because when I play a horror video game, I feel like what horror should make you feel like. Whereas when I come out of a horror movie, I often find myself, my thoughts go to the people that die in the movies. Things Final Destination are some of the worst offenders there, because I don't like seeing innocent people die. My mind literally goes to in that world, they have people that love them that then have to attend that funeral. There are people that die that will never find out what happened to them if it's in a remote part of the world, or people that have been kidnapped and never make it out. I don't know, it messes with me a little bit. anything like that. And I just don't feel good afterwards. I don't know why. I don't know if that's just a me thing, or if that's like a more universal experience. Guys, if you feel that way, if horror makes you feel that way, let me know. Because I wouldn't say that I come out of it like scared, like I don't watch a ghost story and then feel like scared of ghosts. But I do feel like sad. I think I'm just very empathetic, I guess. I don't know. I've been told that sounds like a red flag when someone says they're an empath. We're all empathetic, but I do think there are people with different degrees of how empathetic they are. I would say I'm probably very overly sensitive to that. I feel very strongly for other people, and probably more so than I should. And I think that transfers to film as well, because it doesn't make a lot of sense, but my mind goes to it. But there we go, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to drop a like. If you want to see more Whisper Rambles, make sure to let me know in the comments. It's always good to know what you like, what you don't like. If you want to see more of them, you've got to comment and drop the likes, because I've got to know that they are the videos you guys want. Otherwise, I will just focus on doing other things. So, obviously, as I said there, make sure to drop a like if you enjoyed the video and want to see more of this. Consider subscribing, pressing the bell icon, and of course, the most important thing, well, subscribing is probably one of the more important things, but check out the videos appearing on the side of the screen. I'd really appreciate it, and I will see